Steelers Nation, when you really look at what's happening right now, everything changes for the Pittsburgh Steelers. This isn't talk, projections, or outside noise. It's reality hitting hard, with black and gold speaking for itself. This is about concrete developments that directly affect how this team approaches the final stretch, and how Steelers Nation should be viewing what comes next. The most significant piece starts with the AFC North race and the health of Lamar Jackson. The Ravens are in a position where they must win out to keep their divisional hopes alive, and at the same time, they need the Steelers to lose out. That pressure already tilts the scale, but it becomes even heavier with Lamar Jackson now officially listed as doubtful for their upcoming game against the Green Bay Packers. That designation matters. It is not speculation. It is not a game-time decision framed to mislead. It reflects real concern about his availability, and if he cannot go, Baltimore is once again forced to turn to Tyler Huntley as their starting quarterback. Huntley finished last week's game against the Patriots, and while he is a capable backup, the drop-off from Lamar Jackson is undeniable. Without Lamar's ability to stress defenses with both his arm and his legs, the Ravens' margin for error shrinks dramatically, especially in a must-win scenario. So smash that like button right now if you are black and gold with pride, no fear, and truly believe in this team. Here we go. At the same time, the quarterback situation in Green Bay adds another layer of unpredictability. Jordan Love is currently dealing with concussion protocol after suffering a concussion against the Bears, and Malik Willis is also listed as questionable due to a shoulder injury from that same game. If neither quarterback is cleared, the Packers would be forced to start Clayton Tune, a quarterback currently on their practice squad. That creates the very real possibility of a Huntley versus Tune matchup on Saturday night, a game that could effectively determine whether the Steelers need to win on Sunday against the Cleveland Browns to clinch the division. In a scenario like that, the spotlight shifts away from quarterback play and directly onto the running game, a matchup driven by Josh Jacobs and Derrick Henry, where field position, clock control, and defensive discipline decide everything, plays into the kind of football that historically defines AFC North battles. For Steelers fans, the implications are obvious. A Ravens loss on Saturday would crown Pittsburgh as AFC North champions before they even take the field on Sunday. While the division picture is developing, the Steelers themselves made a roster move that cannot be ignored. Veteran cornerback Trey Flowers has been signed and placed directly onto the active roster. Flowers is not an unknown name. He has spent time with multiple teams across the league, including the Jaguars, Seahawks, and Lions, and brings experience that matters this late in the season. However, this signing appears to be closely tied to injury concerns within the secondary, particularly surrounding Brandon Echols. Echols has missed practice again, and all signs point toward him being unlikely to play against the Browns. If the Steelers felt confident in Echols' availability, there would have been little reason to make this move, let alone elevate Flowers immediately instead of stashing him on the practice squad. The timing and roster decision strongly suggest that the team is preparing for Echols to be unavailable. The expectation is not that Trey Flowers steps in as a starter. The more likely plan is for him to serve as a backup nickel corner behind Jalen Ramsey, who is projected to start in the slot this week. Ramsey has already filled that role when Echols has been sidelined, and his versatility makes him a logical choice. The safety tandem is expected to include Chuck Clark and Kyle Duggar, which further stabilizes the back end. Flowers' value comes as insurance. At roughly 200 pounds, he fits the profile of a big nickel defender, something the Steelers like to deploy within their defensive system. If Ramsey were to go down, the team could insert Flowers without completely reshaping the defensive structure, maintaining similar body types and responsibilities in coverage. However, even that plan carries uncertainty, because Jalen Ramsey did not practice due to illness. If that illness lingers, his availability could be in question, and that scenario opens up a much more complicated conversation about how the Steelers handle their cornerback alignment. Joey Porter Jr. and Asante Samuel Jr. are the clear outside corners, but depth becomes a concern quickly. James Pierre's status also matters here, because if he is able to play, the team has more flexibility. One possibility the Steelers may be preparing for is using Asante Samuel Jr. in the slot. While he has primarily played outside since arriving in Pittsburgh, his size and quickness align more closely with traditional nickel responsibilities, similar in style to what Brandon Echols provides when healthy. It would not be an ideal situation, but it is a contingency worth considering, especially if Ramsey cannot go and the team wants to avoid starting Flowers on such short notice. Beyond the secondary, the injury report remains a critical storyline. TJ Watt continues to be limited in practice, as do Isaac Sumalo, Nick Herbig, and James Pierre. These are not minor names. Each one plays a meaningful role in the overall structure of the team. The final injury report will be telling, but there is also a strategic element at play. If the Ravens lose on Saturday and the division is already secured, the Steelers may choose to be cautious, prioritizing health over short-term urgency. Mike Tomlin has never been a coach who recklessly pushes injured players back onto the field, especially with postseason football looming. If the division is not clinched, the calculus changes slightly, but even then, the long-term view cannot be ignored. All of this paints a picture of a team navigating opportunity and risk at the same time. The Steelers are in position to capitalize on circumstances around them, but they are also dealing with real roster challenges that demand smart decisions. Nothing here is guaranteed, and nothing should be taken lightly. From the uncertainty surrounding Lamar Jackson, to the quarterback situation in Green Bay, to the Steelers' own injury management and defensive depth, this moment demands attention from every fan invested in how this season is shaping up. Based on everything unfolding right now, how do you feel about the Steelers' position heading into this decisive weekend? The bigger picture becomes clearer when you connect all these moving parts and understand how thin the margin really is at this stage of the season. The Steelers are not operating in a vacuum right now. Every injury designation, every practice participation report, and every roster move is part of a calculated approach to controlling what they can while reacting to what they cannot. That is why the limited status of players like T.J. Watt, Isaac Seumalo, Nick Herbig, and James Pierre carries more weight than it normally would. This is not just about one game. It is about protecting the core of the roster while keeping the competitive edge sharp enough to respond if circumstances demand it. T.J. Watt being limited but present is especially significant. When Watt is on the field, even at less than 100%, offenses are forced to alter protections, shift tight ends, and keep running backs into block. His presence alone changes how opponents call plays. The Steelers understand this, which is why caution is being exercised. There is no incentive to push Watt beyond what his body is telling him, particularly if the outcome of the Ravens game reduces the immediate stakes. The same logic applies to Seumalo on the offensive line. Continuity and health up front matter far more in January than squeezing out one extra week of availability in December. Nick Herbig's limited status also deserves attention because of how the Steelers rotate their edge rushers and linebackers. Herbig's energy and versatility have been valuable in keeping the front seven fresh, and losing that depth would quietly affect the defense's ability to sustain pressure late in games. James Pierre, meanwhile, sits at the intersection of special teams and defensive depth. His availability could influence not just coverage units, but also how comfortable the coaching staff feels adjusting the secondary if injuries force their hand. Calvin Austin III and Brandon Echols remaining out of practice further reinforce the sense that this week is about managing attrition. Austin's absence limits offensive flexibility and explosiveness, while Echols' situation directly triggered the Trey Flowers signing. This is not a flashy move, and it was never meant to be. It is a stabilizing move. Flowers is not being asked to redefine the defense. He is being asked to provide a safety net, a veteran presence who understands leverage, assignments, and situational football if called upon. At this point in the season, that kind of reliability can be the difference between surviving a rough patch and watching momentum slip away. What makes this moment compelling for Steelers fans is how quickly everything could lock into place. A Ravens loss immediately shifts the narrative. Suddenly, the conversation turns from scoreboard watching to preparation, health, and postseason positioning. The Steelers would control the division without needing help on Sunday, and that reality changes how every snap against Cleveland is viewed. Even if the Ravens manage to win, the Steelers are still in position, but the urgency level rises. That tension is what defines this stretch of the season. This is also where Mike Tomlin's philosophy comes into focus. He has consistently emphasized readiness without panic, competition without recklessness. You can see that reflected in the practice reports, the roster moves, and the careful language surrounding player availability. Nothing suggests desperation. Instead, it suggests a team that understands exactly where it stands and what it needs to protect. For the fans, this is the part of the season where patience is tested. There is a natural urge to want every key player on the field immediately, to want clarity instead of uncertainty. But football in December and January rarely offers that comfort. It rewards teams that manage chaos better than their opponents. Right now, the Steelers are doing just that, balancing opportunity with restraint, depth with health, and short-term outcomes with long-term goals. What cannot be overlooked is how fragile momentum becomes once the calendar flips this late into the season. The Steelers are walking into a stretch where nothing is theoretical anymore. Every snap has consequence, and every absence reshapes the chessboard. That is why the uncertainty surrounding the Ravens and Packers game looms so large. It is not just about rooting for a specific outcome, it is about understanding how that result dictates Pittsburgh's internal priorities. If Baltimore stumbles without Lamar Jackson, the Steelers immediately gain leverage, not just in the standings, but in how aggressively they need to manage their own roster. That leverage matters because this team is not fully healthy, and pretending otherwise would be dishonest. Limited practices are not coincidences stacked on top of each other. They are signals. Signals that the coaching staff is measuring risk carefully, especially with players who are foundational to how this team wins. The Steelers are built around defense, pressure, and physical control. That identity collapses quickly if cornerstone players are rushed back before they are ready. This is where discipline becomes just as important as talent. The secondary situation is the clearest example of this balancing act. Signing Trey Flowers does not mean panic, but it does mean preparation. The Steelers are acknowledging that Brandon Echols may not be available and that Jalen Ramsey's illness adds another variable they must account for. They are not assuming best-case scenarios. They are planning for contingencies. That mindset is what separates teams that survive December from teams that simply endure it. If Ramsey is healthy, the structure remains stable. If he is not, the coaching staff may be forced to get creative, possibly asking Asante Samuel Jr. to handle responsibilities he has not been asked to carry in Pittsburgh before. That is not ideal, but it is realistic, and realism is what governs this time of year. You do not get perfect conditions. You get problems, and you get tested on how efficiently you solve them. Meanwhile, the front seven continues to be managed with intent. TJ Watt's limited status is not a warning sign as much as it is a reminder of his value. The Steelers know exactly what happens to their defense when what is absent or compromised, and they are not willing to gamble that impact away unnecessarily. The same applies to Sumalo, Herbig, and Pierre. These are not names that fill stat sheets every week, but they are names that hold the structure together when games turn ugly and physical. This is why the upcoming days matter so much. Final injury reports will clarify availability, but they will also reveal philosophy. Whether the Steelers choose to push, protect, or split the difference will tell fans exactly how they view their position in the bigger picture. If the division is secured early, expect caution. If it is not, expect calculated aggression. Either way, nothing about this approach suggests fear or hesitation. It suggests control. And that is the most important takeaway for Steelers Nation right now. This team is not reacting emotionally, it is responding strategically. The outside world may frame this stretch as chaotic, but inside the building, every move aligns with a long-term objective. Winning the division is part of it, but being positioned to survive the postseason grind is the real prize. There's also an emotional layer to all of this that does not show up on an injury report or a depth chart, but every Steelers fan can feel it. This is the point of the season where belief either hardens or cracks. You can sense it in how the team is being discussed, not with hype, but with measured confidence. The Steelers are not being carried by luck. They are being carried by structure, discipline, and timing. And timing, more than anything, is what defines late-season football. Look at how the path is open without the Steelers having to chase it recklessly. The Ravens situation is not something Pittsburgh created, but it is something they are prepared to capitalize on. Lamar Jackson being doubtful is not just a headline, it is a shift in the balance of power. Baltimore without Lamar is a fundamentally different team, especially when the stakes are this high. That reality forces the Ravens into survival mode, while the Steelers remain in control of their own decisions. That contrast matters. At the same time, the Steelers are not acting like a team that assumes anything will be handed to them. That is why practices are being managed carefully. That is why veterans are being added quietly instead of flashy names being chased. That is why no one inside the organization is talking like the job is finished. This is a team that understands how quickly things can flip if focus slips for even a moment. What makes this stretch fascinating is that it reveals character more than talent. Talent gets you into the conversation. Character determines whether you stay there. The Steelers have been tested throughout the season, especially when expectations were uneven and outside narratives questioned their ceiling. Now, with the division potentially within reach and the postseason looming, the response has been calm, not loud, intentional, not reactive. Every move we are seeing points toward one idea: staying dangerous. Staying dangerous means having answers when things go wrong. It means having veterans like Trey Flowers ready even if you hope not to use them. It means protecting players like TJ Watt so that when the games truly matter, the defense still has its teeth. It means understanding that winning in December is important, but winning in January is everything. This is not a team chasing headlines. This is a team positioning itself to strike when the moment demands it. And that is why this weekend feels so heavy, not because of fear, but because of possibility. Possibility that the division is secured early. Possibility that the roster gets healthier at the right time. Possibility that this group enters the postseason underestimated, structured, and fully aware of who they are. At this point, the focus sharpens even more because the margin between being prepared and being exposed is razor thin. The Steelers are standing at a crossroads where experience, patience, and internal trust are being tested simultaneously. This is the phase of the season where teams often reveal who they truly are, not through bold statements, but through how they handle uncertainty. And uncertainty is everywhere right now. Quarterbacks are questionable, key contributors are limited, and outcomes hinge on games the Steelers are not even playing in. Yet through all of this, Pittsburgh's posture remains steady. What stands out is how intentional the organization has been about not overreacting. There's no sense of scrambling, no sense of chasing quick fixes that could backfire. Instead, every move reflects an understanding of identity. The Steelers know they win games by controlling pace, leaning on defense, and forcing opponents into mistakes. That formula does not require perfection, but it does require health, cohesion, and discipline. That is why protecting players now is just as important as deploying them. This is also where leadership inside the locker room matters. Veterans understand what this stretch demands. They know that excitement can be dangerous if it turns into complacency, and frustration can be just as damaging if it turns into panic. The tone set during this week, in meetings, in walkthroughs, and in limited practices, is about staying grounded. The Steelers are not chasing a version of themselves they are not. They are doubling down on what has kept them competitive all season. The potential outcomes ahead only heighten that tension. A Ravens loss changes the math immediately, but it does not change the mission. A Ravens win raises the stakes, but it does not change the approach. That consistency is critical. Teams that fluctuate emotionally rarely survive the postseason. Teams that remain structurally sound, even when circumstances shift, give themselves a chance. And this is why the depth conversation matters so much. Players like Trey Flowers are not headlines, but they are answers. Answers to questions you hope do not get asked, but must be prepared for anyway. Injuries are not excuses in this league. They are realities. The Steelers are acknowledging that reality without letting it define them. As this chapter unfolds, one thing is clear. The Steelers are positioning themselves to enter the next phase of the season on their own terms, not